My name is Renee Calloway, and I'm 36 years old. Not long ago, I sat at the respondent's table in a county courtroom while a lawyer in a suit that cost more than my car called me a kidnapper. The 2 children I've raised for 11 years were listed as my victims. Across the aisle, my sister cried beautifully into a tissue she never once used. 11 years ago, she parked in my driveway, unbuckled her kids, and asked me for 1 hour. 1. I got 11 years of fevers, homework, and night terrors. She got a head start. Now she was back with fresh highlights, a lawyer, and a petition that said I'd stolen her family. But here's what none of them knew. Inside my bag, underneath my checkbook, sat a sealed envelope, 10 years old, never opened, a city name inked across the corner. What happened when the judge finally slid it open? What he asked me, and what I said back, I'll get there. I promise you it's worth staying for. Welcome back to Calm Drama Vault, where quiet women tell the loudest stories of their lives, stories about family, betrayal, and the people who choose to stay. If this one presses on a familiar bruise, drop a comment below and subscribe, so you don't miss what a woman like me does when she finally stops being quiet. Let me take you back 11 years, to a Saturday morning in April. I was 25, renting a small house on Larkspur Street, working double shifts as a hotel receptionist, saving toward night classes in accounting. My sister Dana's car pulled in at 9 that morning with the engine still ticking. She was 30 then, a widow of 10 months, and she came up my walk carrying Owen on her hip like a bag she'd grown tired of. Owen was 1 year old, warm with a low fever. Bea was 4, holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear, half asleep on her feet. Behind them, Dana dragged a single duffel bag of clothes and dropped it on my porch the way you drop off donations. She smelled like cigarettes and expensive perfume, and her eyes kept sliding back toward the car. She said she had an appointment she couldn't miss. She said she couldn't take the kids to it. Then she pressed the diaper bag into my arms and smiled the smile that had gotten her out of everything since we were teenagers. Just 1 hour. Ren, I swear. I asked what kind of appointment starts on a Saturday. She was already walking backward down my steps. Bea waved at the car until it turned the corner, and then she asked if there were crackers. And there were. And that was our whole afternoon. Crackers, cartoons, a fever that broke by 4. At 6, I called Dana. At 7, I called again. By 10, I was standing at my front window with Owen asleep on my shoulder, watching every set of headlights come up Larkspur Street, watching every single one of them keep going. The porch light stayed on all night. The car never came back up my street. By Sunday night, her voicemail was full. By Monday, it wouldn't ring at all. I called the police, and a tired officer explained to me that grown adults are allowed to disappear, that it isn't a crime to leave your kids with family, and that I should call back if I found signs of foul play. The only foul play I found was in her apartment. Her landlord let me in on Tuesday because she owed him rent, and he was hoping I'd pay it. The place was empty. Not ransacked, empty, closets bare, hangers gone. The crib already sold on some classifieds page. The neighbor across the hall told me a truck had come the Thursday before. The Thursday before, she'd packed out her whole life while I was working a double shift. And then she'd driven her children to my porch like the last errand on a moving checklist. My mother, Carol, sat in my kitchen that week with her hands folded and said the things she would keep saying for the next 7 years. She'll come back, Renee. She's their mother. Mom said it like a law of nature, like something you'd be foolish to argue with. I wanted to believe her. Dana's husband had died in a workplace accident 10 months earlier, and grief does strange things to people, and maybe my sister just needed air. That's what I told myself while I bought a crib at a yard sale. Then one night I was tucking in Bea, 4 years old, on a fold-out couch in a room that still had my textbooks in it, and she looked up at me and asked, "Did we do something wrong?" I said, "No, baby. Somebody did, but it was never you." People ask how you raise 2 kids overnight with no warning, and the honest answer is badly, and then less badly, and then one day you realize you've done it for a year. I put my accounting classes on hold and picked up every shift the hotel would give me. I learned that Owen would only sleep if there was white noise running. I learned that Bea got night terrors on the anniversary of her father's death, before I even understood what the date meant to her. I learned that thrift store clothes go on sale in August, and that shame is a luxury item. So I stopped buying it. I signed us up for assistance and stood in line behind women who looked exactly as tired as I did. Nobody in that line asked me where their mother was. Mom helped. She kept the kids on my double shift nights, and she loved them hard. But her generation had rules about trouble. You didn't air family laundry. You didn't say the word abandoned at church. You said Dana was traveling. For a while, I even let the kids believe some version of that. Because what do you tell a 4-year-old? The truth had teeth, and she was so small. The first real wall I hit wasn't money. It was a clipboard. Preschool registration for Owen. One line near the bottom. Signature of parent or legal guardian. I stood in that office holding a pen I had no right to use. The secretary was kind about it. She'd seen it before. She said, "Aunts, grandmas, big sisters." She slid the form back to me and lowered her voice like she was telling me a secret. "You're going to need paperwork, honey." And paperwork, it turned out, needed my sister. The clipboard was a warning. The emergency room was a verdict. 13 months in, Owen, 2 years old by then, caught a fever that spiked hard at 2 a.m. I drove him in, and somewhere between triage and the treatment room, a nurse asked the question that changed my life. "Are you his mother?" "No." "Legal guardian?" "No." She was kind, and they treated him anyway, because that's what emergency rooms do. But a hospital social worker found me in the hallway at 4 a.m. with a folder and a gentle voice, and she explained my situation in plain English. I had no legal standing. None. I couldn't consent to surgery if it ever came to that. I couldn't enroll them, insure them, or defend them. And if the wrong person ever made the wrong phone call, the county could scoop up both kids and place them in foster care while the system sorted out what I was to them. Strangers' houses. Maybe separate strangers' houses. I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage while the sun came up, and Owen slept against the window, and I made the first cold decision of my life. Monday morning, I hired a lawyer in town. She said the cleanest road was legal custody through juvenile court, and the cleanest version of that road ran through Dana's signature. Nobody had heard from my sister in 13 months. So I hired a private investigator too. $1,400, half up front. He found her in 11 days, working at a resort outside Phoenix under a different last name. I emptied my accounting fund, arranged 2 days off, and drove 1,400 miles. She met me at a diner off the interstate because she didn't want me seeing where she lived. 13 months and my sister looked both better and worse. New highlights, an expensive jacket, and eyes that had checked out of our family like it was a room she'd already paid for. I set the papers on the table between us. Consent to legal custody. A notary was coming at 3. My lawyer had arranged it with a mobile service. Dana flipped through the pages like a menu. She didn't ask about Owen's fever or Bee's night terrors. She asked what was in it for her. I want to be careful here, because this is the part of the story I kept sealed for 10 years, and I'm still going to keep it sealed a little longer. There was a price. She wrote it down herself on a napkin in the looping handwriting our mother used to praise. I read what she wrote, and something in me went very quiet and never got loud again. I paid it. The notary came at 3, watched her sign, stamped the seal, and while I was sliding the folder into my bag, Dana lit a cigarette and smiled at me through the smoke. "You always wanted to play house with my kids. Congratulations." I stopped at the door. I told her the truth, level as a shelf. "I'm not playing anything. I'm just the one who stayed." Then I drove 1,400 miles home with a folder on the passenger seat worth more than my car, pulled into Larkspur Street at midnight, and stood in the doorway of the kids' room listening to them breathe. What she made me trade for that signature, I'll tell you when I can say it out loud. We're not there yet. The juvenile court granted me legal custody that summer, and the next 9 years happened the way bread rises, slowly and then all at once. I want to be honest about one thing. I did try to close the door for good. 4 years in, I filed to terminate Dana's parental rights so I could adopt the kids outright. It cost me $3,500 in fees, and it died on the table, because Dana hired an hourly lawyer just long enough to object, then evaporated again, and the case stalled on service and searches until the court dismissed it for want of prosecution. The law leaves a door cracked for mothers. I learned to sleep next to a cracked door. Life got good anyway. I opened Larkspur Pottery Studio 5 years ago with a small business loan and a used kiln I named Marge. I bought the house on Larkspur Street 4 years ago, the same house, because the kids had already survived enough moving. I packed something like 3,000 lunches. I sat through the flu, a broken arm, one science fair, and one middle school heartbreak that required emergency waffles. The kids called me Wren, and I never asked for more than that. And every year, always in April, one blank postcard showed up in my mailbox. No signature, no message, a beach in Texas, a casino in Nevada, a mountain somewhere cold. The first one scared me, and I called my lawyer. There was nothing to do about a blank rectangle. So I stopped showing anyone, and I kept them in a rubber band in the junk drawer. And I tried not to understand what they meant. Somebody out there knew our address. Somebody was keeping track of us. One postcard a year, saying nothing at all. 7 months ago, my mother had a stroke at her kitchen table with a crossword half finished and the kettle still warm. She was 68. At the funeral, Bea held my hand so tight my ring left a mark. And I kept thinking, Mom died still believing her other daughter would walk in late the way she was late to everything. She didn't come. The will was simple, and it shocked no one who knew Mom's last years. Her small house on the edge of town, and $180,000 in life insurance and a lifetime of not buying anything, went into a trust for her 2 grandchildren, for college, for their start in life. I was named trustee. Dana's name appeared exactly once, in a sentence lawyers write when a person has been thought about and decided against. But here's the thing about probate that nobody warns you about. The law is thorough. An estate has to notify the heirs, even the disinherited ones, even the missing ones. So a statutory notice went out by certified mail to my sister's last known address, forwarded who knows how many times, like a flare fired over a dark ocean. For 3 months, nothing. I probated the estate, kept the house lawn mowed, kept the trust accounts clean enough to eat off. I let myself believe the flare had sunk. Then, on a Wednesday in February at 11 in the morning, a rental car parked in front of Larkspur Pottery, and a woman stepped out in a cream coat and sunglasses, and my hands knew her before my eyes did, because they went cold against the wheel of the pottery bench. 11 years. Not a call. Not a birthday card. Not a word at our mother's grave. She pushed open my door like a customer and said, "Hello, Wren." She looked expensive and rented at the same time, like the car. The coat was cream wool, the kind you wear when you've never carried a toddler with a fever. And under the salon polish, she was still my sister. Same chin, same way of tilting her head when she wanted something. The morning rush had cleared out. It was just me, the kiln, and 11 years walking toward my counter. Part 4, she did it well. "I'll give her that." Her eyes went shiny on cue. She said she'd been sick, that she'd been getting better for a long time, that she was finally in a place, she actually said that, in a place where she could be what her children needed. She said she'd thought about them every single day. I looked at her nails while she said it. Fresh manicure. I thought about the junk drawer full of blank postcards and asked her one question. Where were you when Mom was buried? She blinked, and for half a second the performance stuttered, and I watched her choose not to answer. Instead, she leaned on my counter, lowered her voice, and got to it. "I want my babies back, Wren. Owen and Bea." Bea was 17. In the middle of a chemistry project 2 blocks away in a bedroom I'd painted twice. I felt the old heat come up my neck. And I set it down, because I'd had 11 years of practice setting things down. I told her the kids had school, routines, and a life, and that none of it was going to be renegotiated over my counter. If she wanted to talk, there were proper channels. She smiled then, and the shine in her eyes dried up like it had a switch. "You'll hear from someone," she said, and a week later I did. The someone was a process server who apologized twice, and the papers came in 2 layers, like a bad cake. Layer 1, a petition to give Dana custody of Owen and to haul me into court over Bea's senior year. Her lawyer was a man named Preston Cade, and his petition used words the way tabloids use headlines. It said I had obtained custody through a forged consent, that her signature, the one I drove 1,400 miles for, was fake. It called the last 11 years a wrongful retention. In one paragraph, written for the local paper to quote, it used the word kidnapping. Layer 2 arrived at the courthouse the same week, a challenge to our mother's will, claiming I had poisoned a sick old woman's mind against her firstborn. And that second filing was the one that told me the truth, because if the will fell, the trust fell with it, and if Mom died with no valid will, her estate would be split between her 2 daughters, and the kids would get nothing, and Dana would get half a house and half of $180,000. The custody case was the violin. The will case was the wallet. 3 days later, a sheriff's deputy parked outside my studio at lunch hour to ask me polite questions about custodial interference. And even though he closed the complaint within the week, my custody order took him 4 minutes to verify. Half the town watched that cruiser sit outside my shop. I told the kids on a Sunday night over spaghetti, with the words I'd rehearsed against the shower tile. Your mother is back in town. She's asked a court to look at where you live. There will be a process, and grown-ups will handle it, and nothing about tomorrow changes. I kept my voice level, like reading a recipe. The kids did not. Owen, 15, shoved back from the table so hard his chair hit the wall, said she could go somewhere I won't repeat, and went out to shoot baskets in the dark until the neighbor's porch light came on. B, 17, went the other direction, and hers was worse. She got very still, and her ears went pink, and she asked, "Does she want to meet us?" Hope. That's what was in her voice. Hope with the safety off. She was 4 when the car drove away. Her mother is a story other people tell. When Owen was outside, B stacked the plates and, without looking up, asked, "Why did she leave?" The real reason. I gave her the answer I'd been giving since she was 4, the smooth stone I'd sanded for over a decade. She got lost, honey. Some people get lost. B set the last plate down carefully, like it might go off, and looked at me with our mother's eyes. "I'm not 4 anymore, Ren." She went upstairs. I stood in my kitchen with my hands in dishwater gone cold, understanding 2 things at once. My kids were about to be fought over in public, and the story I'd built to protect them had started to rot right under the floorboards. The first hearing lasted 40 minutes, and Preston Cade performed for 35 of them. He's a tall man who wears grief on behalf of his clients, and he stood in front of Judge Marion Weiss and called my life a kidnapping in slow motion. My lawyer, Sophia Reyes, put the custody order on the record along with the deputy's closed complaint, and that killed the criminal talk in one motion. You cannot steal what a court handed you, but civil court is a different animal, and Cade knew it. The forgery claim did exactly what it was designed to do. A signature can't defend itself. It just sits on the page while a stranger calls it a lie. The judge ordered a handwriting expert, appointed a guardian ad litem named Priya Nair to speak for the kids' interests, and, because the law tilts toward mothers who show up crying even 11 years late, granted Dana supervised visitation, 2 hours a week at the Family Services Center. 2 hours a week. It doesn't sound like much until you've had every hour for 11 years, and then it sounds like a hole drilled in the bottom of a boat. Afterward, in the parking lot, Sophia asked me the question good lawyers ask early. The consent page is strong, but they're going to swear it's fake. Do you have anything else from that day? Anything at all? I looked at a crack in the asphalt for a long time. I have something, I said. I'd rather not use it. Sophia studied me the way she studies exhibits. Whatever it is, she said, don't lose it. I didn't tell her it had spent 10 years in a fireproof box waiting for exactly this. The Family Services Center has a playroom with a big window for exactly this occasion, and I stood on the wrong side of the glass and watched my sister meet her children. She was magnificent. I say that with a flat voice and a straight face. She arrived with gifts that proved somebody had done homework. The exact sneakers Owen had posted about online. A sketchbook with the brand of pens B saves up for. Social media is a gift registry if you're shameless enough to use it. She cried at the right times and stopped at the right times. She knew when to reach and when to let them come to her. Owen lasted 20 minutes as a statue, then thawed by degrees. Because 15-year-old boys are not built to be handed the exact right sneakers by a pretty woman who calls them tall. B stayed cooler, polite, upright, answering questions like a witness. Here's the part I'd tell no one for weeks. Before Dana walked into that playroom, I watched her in the hallway through a second window, where she didn't know she had an audience. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her coat twice, the way you press a tablecloth. Something in my chest moved an inch, and I hated it. Then the door opened, the shake vanished, the smile arrived, and the show began. Near the end, she bent to B's ear and whispered something. On the drive home, I asked gently. B looked out the window. Nothing, she said. She said nothing. Our town is a good town, and good towns run on simple stories. And there is no simpler story than a mother who wants her babies back. It got to church before I did. At the spring bake sale, my Aunt Peggy, my mother's sister, 66, a casserole dish in each hand and certainty to spare, cornered me by the folding table with half the congregation in earshot. She's their mother, Renee. Blood is blood. What kind of woman keeps children from their own mother? Heads turned all down the tables. I could have said 11 years. I could have said duffel bag on a porch, or a boy with a fever with no one to sign for him. But you can't win against blood is blood around here. So I picked up my fork and gave my aunt the only true thing I had that fit in one breath. You're right, Peggy. I'm not their mother. I'm just the one who stayed. That week, the studio felt the tide turn. A wedding gift order canceled by voicemail with no reason given. A couple of one-star reviews from accounts that had never reviewed anything but me. Regulars who suddenly took their coffee across the street. Then Thursday night, Sophia called, and her voice had lawyer gravel in it. Cade had subpoenaed the trust records. Every account, every receipt. He's not building a custody case, she said. He's doing inventory. That night, after the kids' doors clicked shut, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took down the gray box, fireproof, dented on one corner, living on the top shelf of my closet since the year I became a legal guardian. Everything that proves my family is real lives inside it. Birth certificates, the custody order with its raised seal, 10 years of receipts, report cards with my signature on the parent line. And underneath all of it, flat on the bottom like a foundation stone, one manila envelope sealed with a strip of packing tape, and a city inked in the corner in my own handwriting. Phoenix. I sat on the edge of my bed and held it under the lamp. 10 years, and the paper had gone soft at the edges, the tape gone amber. I knew every sentence inside it without looking, the way you know a scar under your sleeve. Just 1 hour, Ren. That's what she'd said on my porch, and I'd been living inside that hour ever since. Here's the arithmetic that kept it sealed. Opening it in a courtroom doesn't just show a judge who Dana is. It shows the kids forever. There are no takebacks on a thing like that. You can't unread your mother's handwriting. I put the envelope back on the bottom, stacked 10 years of paper on top of it, turned the key, and slid the box home behind the blankets. Then I went to check the hallway and stopped. Under B's door, at 1 a.m, glowed the blue light of a phone. 2 weeks later, I found out who the phone was talking to. I was delivering a custom mug order across town when I saw them through the front glass of a diner. My niece in the corner booth. And across from her, in sunglasses she didn't need indoors, my sister, no caseworker within miles. Unsupervised contact, in violation of a court order barely a month old. On the table between them sat a small wrapped box, a ribbon sliding across the formica under Dana's manicure like a chess move. I didn't slam through the door. I want credit for that someday. I walked in, said good afternoon to both of them, and told B I needed a second pair of hands with the delivery. Dana didn't argue. She sat back with a small smile and let me collect my own kid. That smile followed me out the door like a hand on my back. In the van, B held the wrapped box on her lap and stared at the windshield, 17 and furious and scared. Then she pulled the pin. She told me things, Ren. She says you paid her 11 years ago. She says you gave her money to stay away, that you wanted us for yourself. The road noise got very loud, because that sentence is what a lie looks like when it's been built by a professional. One true bolt in the middle, everything around it bent. Yes, money had moved between me and my sister once in our lives, and she had taken my worst day, filed the serial numbers off it, and handed it to my girl as proof that her whole childhood was something I'd purchased out of loneliness. B watched the side of my face and asked quietly, "Is it true?" A yes would poison her. A no would be a lie, and she'd smell it, because she has been reading my face since she was 4 years old. So I reached for the middle, the way I always had, and the middle finally failed me. "It's more complicated than that," I said. B nodded slowly, the way you nod at a stranger, and looked back at the windshield. "That's not a no." We drove the rest of the way with the radio off. Something in our house shifted that afternoon. Nothing dramatic, just a door that used to stay open, staying closed. A girl who used to talk to me, chewing everything twice before saying half of it. Monday I sat in Sophia's office and told her about the diner. She straightened like a bird dog. An unsupervised meeting arranged behind the court's back with a gift. That's a violation. That's leverage. We report it today, and it stains Dana in front of Judge Weiss. Then she saw my face. Reporting it meant an affidavit. It meant be summoned into a hallway with lawyers, made to testify about her own mother, turned from a 17-year-old into an exhibit. That is Dana's way of using children, and it has never once been mine, and I wasn't going to learn it now just because it worked. I told Sophia no. She rubbed the bridge of her nose and said I was making her job harder and her respect for me inconvenient. Fine, she said. Then we need something else. And you keep telling me you have something else. So the question became, when I go to the cemetery on the first Sunday of every month, to mom stone and rake because somebody should, and the kids come at Christmas and birthdays. It was raining thin and cold, and I was walking the gravel loop with a bundle of flowers when I saw a figure already at Dana's husband's grave, and I stopped under a maple before she could hear me. Dana. No audience, no lawyer, no camera-ready coat. A gas station umbrella and flat shoes, kneeling on the wet grass in front of his name. She was crying in a way I hadn't seen since we were girls. The ugly kind. The kind that doesn't photograph. She was talking to the stone. I only caught pieces over the rain. That she was sorry. That she couldn't breathe in that house after the accident, with 2 babies and his boots still by the door. And then one whole sentence, clear as a bell, that I have turned over every night since. After the first year, there was no version of me coming back that wasn't a monster, so I stayed gone. I stood under that maple with flowers going heavy in my hand, and for one long minute, I saw the whole thing from inside her skin. 30, widowed, drowning, raised her entire life to be the pretty one somebody rescues, and nobody left to do the rescuing. I almost stepped out. I almost said her name the old way, without armor in it. Then she stood, brushed the knees of her pants, looked down at the stone, and her voice changed back into the one from my studio. That house should have been half mine, she told her dead husband. Mom owed me that. She fixed her collar and walked to the rental car through the rain. I stayed under the maple until she was gone, and I put the flowers down, and I stopped feeling like a monster for what I was about to do. Depositions happen in conference rooms with bad coffee, and Cade ran mine like a man carving a roast. Small slices, no hurry. When did I take possession of the children? Possession? Like they were furniture. Had I ever restricted their contact with their mother? Had I benefited financially from my mother's estate? 2 hours of small slices, and then, without changing his tone, the knife went in. Ms. Calloway, did you ever pay my client money? The room went still. Sophia's pen stopped. And this is what people don't understand about oaths. The truth doesn't check first whether it will be used fairly. Yes, I said. Cade let it sit there, then smiled, unhurried, like a man confirming a reservation. $15,000, wasn't it? Wired out of state. No further questions today. I watched the story assemble itself in that little room, the story he would tell a courtroom soon. The story Dana had already whispered to my niece as an inoculation. A lonely woman, aging out of her chances, wanted a family. She found her widowed sister at rock bottom, waved $15,000 at her grief, bought her signature, and helped her disappear. Then played the martyr for 11 years on the strength of it. It was elegant. It was obscene. Every fact in it was mine, and every joint had been rewired to bear the opposite load. In the parking lot, Sophia was quiet for a while, then asked the question she'd been circling for a month. This thing you have and don't want to use. Does it answer that? I looked at her over the roof of my car. It answers everything, I said. That's why the kids can never see it. Sophia held my eyes. Renee, after today, the question is no longer whether they hear it. It's whose mouth they hear it from. Sophia laid it out for me the next morning with legal pad honesty. Option 1, produce the envelope. It rebuts the forgery claim, it reframes the money, and it likely ends both cases. And it enters the public record, discoverable, quotable, permanent, where 2 kids with library cards and Wi-Fi will someday read every line of it. Option 2, keep it sealed and fight on character. 10 years of receipts against a mother's tears, in front of a judge trained by law and habit to give mothers the benefit of the doubt. She didn't tell me which one to choose. Good lawyers don't. They just make sure you can't pretend you didn't know the price. That same week, Priya Nair came to do her guardian ad litem interviews, a calm woman with sensible shoes and a canvas tote, court-appointed to speak for the kids. She toured the house, saw the growth chart penciled inside the pantry door, the shelf of ribbons. She talked to each kid alone, with the door cracked per protocol. While I stood in the kitchen not listening so hard my ears rang. Owen came out in 8 minutes. B took 20 and left with her jaw set. Then the certified letter, Cade's office, titled Confidential Settlement Proposal, and it was the most honest document Dana ever sent me, because it had numbers in it instead of feelings. Here is what my sister offered. She would withdraw the custody petition. She would drop the will contest. She would sign a full, permanent surrender of her parental rights, consent to adoption, notarized, ironclad, the document I had chased for a decade. In exchange, $70,000 from me personally, not the trust, my lawyer flagged, because even Cade knew better, and my resignation as trustee of the kids' money in favor of a neutral corporate fiduciary. Sophia read it twice and said, in her flattest voice, that it was the cheapest piece of leverage anyone would ever offer me. She wasn't wrong. $70,000 was my studio's line of credit, plus most of my house equity, plus every dollar I'd saved since. Painful, possible, and then done. No trial, no exhibit, no 17-year-old girl reading her mother's handwriting in a court file. Owen would keep his soft-focused mother who got lost. B would never have to watch me prove what I paid for. The envelope could rot sealed in the gray box until I died. And all it required was for me to do the exact thing I did 10 years ago, at more than 5 times the price. Pay her, seal it, call the silence protection, and wait for the next certified letter in 5 years or 10, when the silence came up for renewal. $70,000 for my family to stay mine. Would you have paid it? Be honest with me. Comment yes or no below, and subscribe before you decide, because what I chose instead changed all 3 of us. I told Sophia I needed 1 night. She said take 2. I only needed the 1. I sat at my kitchen table that night with the checkbook open, and the lamp making a little island of the whole decision. I'd already done the math on a napkin. I could cover it, barely ugly, with the line of credit and a second mortgage, and my hand knew how to write the numbers. My hand had done it before. I sat there so long the furnace cycled twice. Around midnight, the stairs creaked, and B came down in her old robe, and instead of the refrigerator, she pulled out the chair across from me, which she hadn't done in weeks. She looked at the checkbook and at the letter beside it, which I hadn't hidden fast enough. And my girl read the whole battlefield in about 4 seconds because she's mine, even where it's inconvenient. That's what she really came for, she said. Not a question. I didn't insult her by pretending. Then B leaned forward with her elbows on the table, and she took my whole operation apart in one breath. If you pay her again, she'll come back again. You know that, right? Again. The word sat between us with its shoes off, completely at home. And I understood that she'd known since the diner, maybe before, and had been waiting to see what I'd do with the truth this time. And then B said the other thing, the one that ended 10 years of policy at my kitchen table. Stop protecting me from my own life, Ren, 17 years old. She got up, squeezed my shoulder like I do to her when she's sick, and went back to bed. I sat with the lamp and the checkbook a while longer to be sure. Then I closed the checkbook, and at 3 a.m, I stood in my closet doorway, looking up at the gray box behind the blankets. At 9 the next morning, I put the gray box on Sophia's desk, still cold from my trunk. I told her no settlement. I heard my own voice say it the way I say oven temperatures. Flat, exact, not up for discussion. I bought her silence once. It expired. I'm done renting my family back 1 decade at a time. Then I turned the key, took out the manila envelope with Phoenix inked on the corner, and told her what was inside out loud, in order, for the first time in 10 years. Sophia didn't touch it for a moment. Then she walked me through the consequences at funeral pace, because she owed me that. Once it goes on the exhibit list, Cade sees it. Once it's evidence, it's public record. And one day, 5 years, 10, the kids can pull it, or some helpful stranger will pull it for them. Once it's in, Renee, they will read it someday. All of them. Then they'll hear it from me first, I said. Every word, before that courtroom does. We declined the settlement in writing before lunch. Cade's reply came by email at 4:11, short even for him. "We'll see you at trial. Bring the forgery." Priya Nair filed her guardian ad litem report the week before trial, and Sophia read me the important parts over the phone. The children are deeply bonded to their aunt, whose home is the only one they have ever truly known. Removal would be devastating. Recommend the current custody arrangement continue. I was breathing again by the third sentence. Then Sophia read me the other line, aimed at me. The guardian's persistent lack of transparency with the children regarding their mother's departure is noted with concern. I didn't argue with it. You don't argue with a level. It just tells you what's true. The night before trial, I didn't sleep, and I didn't try. I sat on the edge of my bed with the envelope in my lap, and through the wall I could hear Owen's fan running, the white noise on since he was 2. In 9 hours, whatever a judge decided, their mother was going to die a second time, and I was the one bringing the shovel. The county courtroom smells like old wood and radiator dust. Judge Weiss presided. In the second row, in her good blouse, sat B, hands folded, spine straight, watching everything. Dana took the stand in dove gray, and for 35 minutes she gave the finest performance of her life. She had been ill. She touched her collarbone when she said it. She had gotten help, gotten steady, tried for years to find her way back. And then, chin trembling at exactly the right frequency, she found me at the respondents' table and told the judge the story I'd heard assembling itself for months. Her little sister had always wanted what she had come to her at her lowest, waving money, hungry for a family of her own. She paid me to disappear, Your Honor. That signature they keep showing everyone, it is not mine. She wept then, carefully, the tissue hovering. I watched the gallery lean toward her like plants toward a window, and I understood with a kind of scientific calm that she might actually win this. Cade turned to Judge Weiss with the satisfaction of a man resting his case an inch from the finish line. Then he looked at Sophia and said, "Your witness." Sophia walked me through the honest inventory first, the custody order, the school records, 10 years of my signature on the parent line. Then Cade got his turn, coming at me pleasantly, the way you'd approach a pie you intend to drop. He built each question one brick higher, then set the last one down with the flourish he'd been saving all trial. "Isn't it true, Ms. Calloway, that you bought yourself 2 children for $15,000? The room went still. I looked at B in the second row, my girl in her ironed blouse, who had told me at a midnight kitchen table to stop protecting her from her own life. Then I looked at Judge Weiss, and I heard my own voice come out level. "No, sir, and I'd like to enter something into evidence." Cade objected on principle. Sophia was already at the bench with the exhibit list, where it had sat for weeks. The judge waved them through and let me speak. "It's an envelope, Your Honor. It's 10 years old. I sealed it in a diner outside Phoenix the day my sister signed that consent, and I have kept it sealed ever since, because of what it would cost 2 children to read it." The bailiff carried it up, and the courtroom watched it travel like it was lit. I found Dana's face while it moved. She had gone the color of unbaked dough. "She asked me for 1 hour," I said to the judge, but not only to him. I gave her children 11 years. The rest of that story is in your hands now. Judge Weiss opened the envelope with a letter knife, unhurried. 3 things came out onto the bench. The notarized consent, original seal, signed in blue ink while a notary and I both watched. The twin of the copy Cade had spent months calling a forgery. A wire receipt dated the same week, $15,000 drawn from a savings account labeled in my own optimistic handwriting from another lifetime. Accounting school, and a single sheet of diner stationery, and I watched him read it. And I knew every loop of the handwriting because I had read it 10,000 times before I taped the flap. "You want papers? 15,000. And I'll sign whatever you put in front of me. Don't come looking for me again. Tell them I'm dead if it's easier. D." The courtroom was silent, but this was a different silence. This was the silence of a man behind a bench reading a mother's price list. He took off his reading glasses, folded them, looked at Dana for a long moment, then at me. "Ms. Calloway, do they know?" "Not yet," I said. He held my eyes and something passed between us. 2 people who each knew the weight of paper. Then he adjourned for lunch and ordered the exhibit into the record. There's a conference room off the courthouse hallway, and that's where my family actually happened, more than in any courtroom. I sat B and Owen down and put copies of all of it on the table, face down, my hand flat on top. And then I paid the bill I'd been running from for 10 years. I told them about the clipboard in the emergency room, about the diner outside Phoenix and the papers on the table, and the blank postcards in the junk drawer. One a year, every April, our address in her pocket the whole time. I told them their mother asked for money to sign, and that I paid it. $15,000, my school, my someday. Then I turned the papers over and let them read the stationery. Tell them I'm dead if it's easier. Owen stared at the wall with his jaw working. B read it standing up twice, then set it down and looked at me. You let me spend 11 years wondering what I did wrong, she said. Quiet, not a shout. You knew, and you let me wonder. I didn't defend myself, because she was right, and because I finally understood the flaw in the load-bearing beam. I hadn't only been protecting them. I'd been protecting me. It was yours, I told the two of them. I'm sorry. It took a courtroom to make me brave. The afternoon session took 35 minutes. Dana's case died quietly at a table, the way paper kills things. With the original consent in evidence and a notary's seal on the exhibit, the forgery claim was no longer merely weak. It was perjury with a runway. After a whispered conference, her lawyer withdrew the allegation on the record. The will contest went with it. Judge Weiss denied the petition from the bench. He made a finding of abandonment. 11 years, he said. Without one phone call, $1 or one birthday card is not an illness or an estrangement. It is a decision, renewed daily. 6 weeks later, with the abandonment finding on the books, Sophia filed to terminate Dana's rights and start adoption proceedings for Owen. Nobody objected. The certified notices came back signed by a stranger at a mail center in Nevada. B turned 18 that November, which meant she'd aged out of the whole question, until she sat down at my kitchen table one Sunday night, slid a printout across to me and said, "File one for me too. Adult adoption. It exists," she'd researched it herself, "and change my last name while you're at it." Then, because she saw my face, she looked at her hands and finished it. "You're not just the one who stayed, Wren. You're my mom. The paperwork's just late. The paperwork was 10 years late. And I signed it anyway. And I did not manage to do it with a steady hand. And no one at that table held it against me. She asked me for 1 hour. 11 years ago, on a porch I still sweep every morning. Her hour is finally up. And the kids, now, they know all of it. And they're still here. If you take one thing from my 11 years, let it be this. Blood can tell you where you came from. But it's the people who stay. Who show up at 4 a.m. with a thermometer. Who tell you the truth even when it costs them the version of themselves they love best. Who tell you where you belong. Family isn't the name on your birth certificate. It's the name on 3,000 lunchboxes. It's who's still standing in the kitchen when every set of headlights has kept on going. That's my story. 1 gray box, 1 sealed envelope, 1 question from a judge. Do they know? And the longest hour my family ever lived. If you've ever been the one who stayed, the one who carried it all quietly, tell me your story in the comments, because somebody down there needs to read it tonight. Subscribe to Calm Drama Vault before you go. There are more quiet women out here, and we're done being quiet.